We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Tens of thousands of rescue workers in Japan battle through the night seeking survivors of a powerful typhoon that killed nearly 50 people, with fresh rain prompting new warnings.
Hong Kong's tourism industry is battling with a large drop in visitor numbers as a result of months of pro-democracy protests, with arrivals down 40% according to the city's tourist board.
Wildfires raging across Southern California showed signs of slowing Sunday as firefighters contained nearly half of the biggest blaze.
And Ecuador's president and indigenous leaders reached an agreement to end nearly 2 weeks of violent protests against austerity measures put in place to obtain a multi-billion-dollar loan from the IMF.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Tens of thousands of rescuers work into the night Monday to find survivors of a powerful typhoon in Japan that killed at least 56 people as fresh rain threatened to hamper their efforts. Typhoon Hagibis crashed into the country on Saturday night, unleashing high winds and torrential rain across 36 of the country's 47 prefectures, triggering landslides and catastrophic floodings. The death toll from the disaster has risen steadily, with national broadcaster NHK saying Monday night that 56 people had been killed and 15 were still missing. It cited its own tally based on local reporting. The government has given lower numbers, but it's still updating its information. Even now, many people are still unaccounted for in the disaster-hit area, according to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in an emergency disaster meeting on Monday. He said units are trying their best to search for and rescue them, working day and night. Now, later in the day, he pledged to do whatever the country can for victims and survivors, ordering the Defense Ministry to call up to 1,000 reserve troops to join 31,000 active forces in search operations. But rescue work that was continuing into the night risked being hampered by additional rain falling in central and eastern Japan that officials warned could cause fresh flooding and landslides.
まずはじめにヘリコプターがぐるぐるぐる回ってた。もうそれはもう状況把握だろ。もうそれは確実。異常な光景だったもん。でも皆さんね、これからはこんなものは30年ぐらい前のあったことだけども、これからは10年に一度ぐらいは確実にあると思います。
Rescue workers used boats during an hours-long operation to retrieve hundreds of people trapped in a retirement home in Kawagoe, northwest of Tokyo, when floodwaters inundated the building. Rescue efforts were also continuing on Monday morning, with local television showing soldiers rowing a rubber rescue dinghy through floodwaters in Fukushima, while elsewhere, workers removed dirt with a digger. The death toll mounted throughout the day Sunday as bodies were recovered from flooded homes and cars, buildings caught in landslides and swollen rivers. The dead included a municipal worker whose car was overcome by floodwaters and at least 5 Chinese crew members aboard a boat that sank in Tokyo Bay on Saturday night. On Monday morning, some 57,500 households remained without power, with 120,000 experiencing water outages. The disaster left tens of thousands of people in shelters, with many unsure when they would be able to return home.
People in Japan are dealing with the aftermath of Typhoon Hagibis. The death toll now stands at more than 40. With more rain in the forecast, city officials are calling on residents to stay prepared for a further emergency. Here's our ABC correspondent Tyra Lu with more.
Death toll rises to 42 and still counting after Super Typhoon Hagibis battered eastern Japan last weekend, leaving in its wake at least 198 injured and 17 still missing. Japan Meteorological Agency recorded about 40% of the yearly rainfall was experienced in just a day or two in many areas, particularly in 15 prefectures where the agency issued a level 5 emergency warning, the highest in Japan's warning scale. This includes Tokyo, Kanagawa, Saitama, Yamanashi, Shizuoka, Gunma, Nagano, Niigata, Fukushima, Tochigi, Ibaraki, Miyagi, and Iwate. Over 6 million residents all over the country, particularly in the Honshu region, were ordered to evacuate. The Land and Transport Ministry said levees and 21 rivers collapsed, leaving roads completely submerged in muddy water. One of the rivers that gave out is the Chikuma River that affected a large area in Nagano, a few prefectures away northwest of Tokyo, as water reached 5 meters in depth. The ministry also reported 48 landslides and mud flows and 9 river inundation from 12 prefectures. In Gunma, 2 hours away northwest of Tokyo, 4 died after a landslide ruined their house. In Kanagawa Prefecture, south of Tokyo, was also flooded, putting over 220 residents and staff at risk. However, caregivers acted quickly as they evacuate residents immediately after seeing bubbles of water popping from under the floor, a caregiver said. A railway collapsed and fell into the river, and flood waters disrupted railway services. A maintenance depot for the Hokuriku Shinkansen bullet train was also flooded. East Japan Railway also reported about 4 meters of flood damaged 10 trains with a total of 120 train cars. Dam operators were also given go signal to release waters to avoid from bursting. Moreover, in the midst of a super typhoon, a tornado destroyed 12 houses and 17 others in the different parts of Ichihara and Chiba, east of Tokyo. According to local officials, a 50-year-old man was found dead inside his car after being turned over by the tornado. Tokyo Electric Power Company Holdings Incorporated reported over 20,000 households in the eastern and central part were without electricity. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Tyranel Pililu for Eagle News International, and I am 1 with 25.
In other news, wildfires raging across Southern California showed signs of slowing on Sunday as firefighters contained nearly half of the biggest blaze. A fire that had burned rapidly through the San Fernando Valley in Greater Los Angeles, was the strongest of several across Southern California. By early Sunday morning, the Saddle Ridge fire was about 41% contained, according to fire officials, adding it had consumed 8,000 acres, about 20 miles north of downtown Los Angeles. Evacuation orders were lifted Saturday after 100,000 people were forced to flee their homes. Cooler temperatures and lighter winds over the weekend improved the outlook, and residents were allowed to return. One man in his 50s died of a heart attack as he struggled to save his home, according to fire officials. The fire broke out on Thursday night, and then it quickly grew out of control in the city of Silmar, driven by low humidity and gusts known as the Santa Ana winds. The metro line in the area was also closed, as were schools and businesses. The blaze destroyed 76 homes and buildings and killed an 89-year-old woman who was unable to escape the flames. The wildfires in Southern California erupted as the state's largest utility, Pacific Gas Electric, or PGE, implemented rolling power blackouts that affected some 2 million people in the north. The shutoffs were designed to reduce the threat of wildfire that can be sparked by lines downed in heavy winds.
Southern California's Saddle Ridge fire forces thousands from home. Eva Basalyahe, ABC Los Angeles Bureau reports.
The Saddle Ridge fire has prompted massive evacuation orders for thousands of Southern California residents, some of whom are seeking shelter here at the Sylmar Recreation Center.
The fire was coming down the hillside and we could see the wind was blowing so hard. So yeah, we said we just need to get out of here. You could see the flames. Oh my goodness, yes. We could see the flames. They were vivid. It was out of control. It was out of control. So there was a lot of smoke and it got to the point where I had to, take my jacket and cover my face just to breathe.
I'm here because my dad thought it was a good idea to come to the shelter. They have given me a blanket, a bed, some food, and also a TV. Coloring books, and my toy, and my blanket, and a place to be safe.
I think the house is safe right now in this moment because we was there like 2 hours ago. But the smell is very bad over there, and that's why they keep us here at least for another day.
I sell these homemade tortas, but today I have some left, and I know with all my heart I've been thinking about these people that is here because I live 2 blocks from here, and I know a lot of people from other areas are coming to this place, so I thought about them and bring some food, and also for the LAPDs, for the fire department. I would like to thank everybody for help. I have 2 daughters that work for the law enforcement, so I know what it is. So thank for them. They help us a lot.
This fire here has displaced a lot. We actually have 4 shelters. We have here Sylmar, we have Granada Hills, we have Northridge, and we have Mason Park is one. And Los Angeles City has actually opened up one too, and they're thinking about opening another one. All of our facilities are at max right now. Here we have 75 people, plus we have about 19 animals consisting of dogs and cats too. Every day we take a tally of how many people are here for breakfast, how many people are here for lunch, how many people are here for dinner, so that we know we have enough food. And then we consider the other people, like the police are here, media's here, we have the LA Parks and Recs are here, we have city employees, we have behavioral health here from the county. So looking at all these together, we're here to help them all because we're working together as a group. You see kids and all of a sudden, they've maybe lost their house, and someone gives them a stuffed animal, and that's like, wow. And so it gives them something to comfort, and it helps them, because all of a sudden they've got something where it's like, wow, this is mine, and it's where they might have left their stuffed animal or their doll at home, and all of a sudden now they have something more to help them, to comfort them.
According to the Los Angeles Fire Department, 31 structures have been damaged or destroyed by the Saddle Ridge fire that's burned over 7,500 acres. Latest reports place containment at only 13%, with over 13,000 residents displaced from their homes. California Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency in Los Angeles and Riverside counties due to fire outbreaks. And with high winds elevating the danger, more than 1,000 firefighters are on the ground battling the flames, while airships are bombarding the blazes with payloads of water and fire retardant. Red flag warnings are expected to continue into Saturday evening. With Santa Ana winds potentially feeding flames and spreading embers, the message from emergency services for Los Angeles residents is clear. Be packed and ready to go at any moment in case your neighborhood is instructed to evacuate. Live in Sylmar, California, Eva Basayahe, Eagle News. I am 1 with 25.
Meanwhile, riot police clashed with anti-government protesters across Hong Kong on Sunday as masked activists vandalized businesses deemed sympathetic to Beijing, pursued through the streets by riot police in another weekend of chaos in the financial hub. Rallies erupted in multiple neighborhoods with some protesters blocking roads, sabotaging train tracks, and trashing pro-China businesses. Now, police said an officer was taken to hospital after his neck was slashed. Local television networks also broadcast footage of a man beaten bloody by protesters after they found a baton in his bag and suspected him of being an undercover officer. Police have increasingly posed as protesters, scoring some tactical successes and sparking widespread paranoia among frontline demonstrators. During cat-and-mouse encounters on Sunday, officers made dozens of arrests, but there were fewer protesters than have taken to the streets during the 4-month-long protest movement. In Mongkok, a bustling shopping district on the Kowloon Peninsula, officers burst from an unmarked van over a blockade of bamboo scaffolding and quickly chased down multiple protesters. Protesters have increasingly turned on their ideological opponents in recent weeks, while Beijing loyalists have attacked democracy activists throughout the summer. Online forums used to organize the largely leaderless movement advertised on Sunday as a Blossom Everywhere Day, encouraging activists to gather in malls across the city. Protests and clashes were reported in half a dozen neighborhoods, with police saying they fired tear gas during 2 incidents. While the crowds were thinner, the flash mob tactics stretched police resources and still brought chaos to parts of the city for a 19th consecutive weekend.
A Hong Kong police officer is slashed in the neck by a protester with a sharp object in the district of Kwun Tong. Take a look. Police says the officer remained unconscious as he was taken to hospital and 2 men were arrested on scene. The beginning of October saw a particularly fierce period of unrest, with protesters upping their violence as Communist China celebrated its 70th birthday party. Clashes further intensified after the city's leader invoked colonial-era emergency laws to ban face masks at protests.
Officials have released the identities of the 4 men who were killed at what police say appears to have been an illegal gambling den in Brooklyn. At least 3 other people were injured in the shooting. Police said at least 15 people were inside the building at the time. Eddie Baldwin said his brother, 36-year-old Terrence Bishop, was one of those victims. Now, the 3 other men, all from Brooklyn, were also killed. Police have identified them as 47-year-old Dominic Wimbush, 37-year-old Chester Goody, and 32-year-old John Thomas. The shooting on the borough's major artery, Utica Avenue, took place at the AAA Aces private social rental place, what NYPD Chief of Detectives Dermot Shea called an illegal gambling location. Mr. Shea said it was too early to tell whether the dispute was gambling or perhaps robbery-related. The shooting comes 1 month after the city saw its lowest number of shootings of any September since the NYPD started its CompSat crime tracking program in 1994. In a country plagued by gun violence, New York State has some of the strictest rules concerning purchasing, possessing, and carrying firearms, particularly in the city and its suburbs. Data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention dating to 2017 showed that the state's death rate due to firearms was 3.7 per 100,000 people. The state legislature passed the Secure Ammunition and Firearms Enforcement, or SAFE Act, in 2013, which, among other provisions, bans most assault weapons and large-capacity ammunition magazines. The act also requires ammunition dealers to conduct background checks. Earlier this year, new measures were introduced, including a ban on bump stocks, which can allow faster shots, and a longer mandatory waiting period to conduct background checks for some firearm sales. The Giffords Law Center, which ranks states according to the strength of its gun laws, puts New York State at 6 out of 50. According to the research center, 54% of the state's gun deaths are the result of suicide, also noting that gun violence there has a disproportionate impact on urban communities of color. Black men have up just 9% of the state's population, the law center said, but accounts for nearly 64% of the state's gun homicide victims.
2 construction workers died and at least 18 others were injured Saturday when the top floors of a Hard Rock hotel in downtown New Orleans that was under construction collapsed. Hazardous conditions, according to New Orleans Fire Chief Tim McConnell, prevented search teams from recovering the bodies of 2 construction workers killed when the upper floors of the building suddenly gave way and pancaked on one another. He said the identities of the dead construction workers and the one who remains missing have yet to be confirmed. Authorities have not said that or what caused the collapse, but promised a relentless investigation into the incident.
Ecuador's president and indigenous leaders reached an agreement on Sunday to end nearly 2 weeks of violent protests against austerity measures adopted to obtain a multi-billion-dollar loan from the IMF. The demonstrations have left 7 people dead and were sparked by President Lenin Moreno scrapping fuel subsidies to obtain a $4.2 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund, a move that caused prices to double. President Moreno met with Jaime Vargas, the head of the indigenous umbrella grouping CONE, for 4 hours of talks in the capital Quito, broadcast live on state television.
Un acuerdo no significa ganarlo todo. Acuerdo significa ceder algo. Por eso digo que poco queda por decir. Qué bueno que la palabra que en esta última instancia más se ha repetido ha sido la de la paz.
Thousands flooded into the streets of Quito shortly after the announcement. On Sunday, violent clashes continued before the talks began as police fought to disperse protesters who tried to put up a barricade of debris from Saturday's unrest. Ecuador's indigenous groups make up a quarter of the country's 17.3 million people. Thousands from disadvantaged communities from across the Amazon and the Andes traveled to Quito to spearhead demands the subsidies be reinstated. Authorities said 1,349 people had been injured and 1,152 detained in the demonstrations. The violence forced President Moreno to relocate his government to Ecuador's second city, Guayaquil, and hit the oil industry hard, with the energy ministry suspending more than 2/3 of its distribution of crude. Protesters seized 3 oil facilities in the Amazon.
Airstrikes and a ground offensive by Turkey in northern Syria against Kurdish forces have left civilians dead and forced tens of thousands to flee, UN agency said on Friday. Speaking in Geneva, Jens Lark from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA, said that Thursday had seen intense shelling all along the northeastern Syrian border with Turkey. He noted that the UN had not been involved in any reported attempts to set up a buffer zone between the two countries.
Yesterday, there was intense shelling and airstrikes all along the northeastern Syrian border with Turkey, from Jarablus to the west of the Euphrates to the Iraqi border.
As of last night, we had more or less confirmed reports of 7 civilians, including 2 women and a boy, who had been killed, with another boy injured during the first 2 days of the Turkish operation. In addition, a civilian man was reported killed in Jarablus on the 9th of October, and a woman and a boy injured yesterday during counterattacks and ground strikes by Kurdish non-state armed groups.
Mass population displacement has been reported since the escalation of violence. Over 70,000 people from Ras Al Ain and Tal Abeid have been displaced so far.
I have no information of any Syrian refugees returning to the what is being called the safe zone.
When we talk about quote-unquote safe zones, it's not something that's been set up by humanitarians. It is a zone that's set up by military planners in Turkey. So we do not control it, and we have not been involved in the planning of it.
What is happening and what has been happening in the last 48 hours is extremely worrying. And I believe that we have there all the ingredients for, unfortunately, yet another humanitarian crisis in Syria.
In Ras Al Ain, the Aluk water pumping station reportedly came under attack early yesterday morning. This is a station that provides safe water to at least 400,000 people in Hasake Governorate, including displacement camps.
We do have staff that remain there. Of course, their ability to operate and provide relief is severely restricted and hindered by the ongoing hostilities. And as I mentioned also, local authorities are reportedly imposing some quite strict security measures at checkpoints.
Any safe zone would have to, be set up with full international humanitarian law safeguards in place, including the consent of the government and warring parties, and the zone being of civilian character, and safety of civilians would be hard to guarantee.
People are moving inside Syria, so we can assume that yes, they will go towards south. And as I said before, now with the complexity and also areas like Deir el-Zor, Raqqa, which are not necessarily places that can welcome thousands of people. So we are ready, and we will see how it evolves in the coming hours, because I mean it's moving very fast.
The Philippine National Police Chief General Oscar Albayalde relinquished his post as he goes into non-duty status. This is effective Monday, barely more than 3 weeks before his mandatory retirement, amid allegations dragging him into the reselling of seized illegal drugs. He said his move aims to pave the way for President Duterte to choose the new PNP chief.
After careful thought and deliberation, I have come to the decision to relinquish my post as Chief PNP, effective today, and go on non-duty status. I have submitted my letter of intent to Secretary Anyo, which he accepted and favorably endorsed to the President.
General Albayalde, who is set to retire on November 8, was implicated in the issue of ninja cops, or policemen involved in reselling illegal drugs. He was the Pampanga Provincial Police Director when 13 of his men were involved in an anti-illegal drug operation in November of 2013, which was found to be irregular.
My last command as your Chief PNP is for you to carry on in the service of our fellow Filipinos, so that all of us may live and work in peace. Do not let these challenges demoralize or stray you from your path.
PNP spokesman Brigadier General Bernard Bana confirmed on Monday that General Albayalde decided to step down because of the drug reselling controversy involving some police officers that is being investigated by the Department of Interior and local government and Congress.
Kung matutuloy ang schedule sa October 29, ito ay assumption of command na, assumption of office. Labis na naapektuhan ang kanyang personal na buhay, maging ang kanyang pamilya. So, maring ito rin ay isa sa mga nagbigay or naging dahilan para talagang mag-decide na siya na bumitiw na sa pwesto.
Taking his steed as officer in charge is PNP Deputy Chief for Administration, Lieutenant General Archie Gamboa, which took place through a simple ceremony led by the Interior and Local Government Secretary Eduardo Año. As OIC, Gamboa's powers are limited. The National Police Commission shall be issuing a resolution on his functions as the interim leader of the force. Gamboa expressed his trust for his MISTA and pledged to continue the work that Albayalde has started.
Been his Chief of Staff, then I have been his DCO. So mabilis lang yung transition because he knows that I already know my job as officer in charge, no? Kasi nagkasama kami. And ang ano talaga doon is the secretary, no? As I think already released to the press also, that at no time did he lose any, did he cast any doubt on the integrity of the Chief PNP.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Monday set out his government's priorities at a parliamentary ceremony full of pomp and pageantry attended by the Queen, with Brexit top of the agenda. But with time running out for an amicable divorce deal before EU leaders meet later this week, Few of the proposals look likely to be enacted, with predictions of a snap election. Queen Elizabeth II announced in a speech to lawmakers a list of 26 new bills ranging from implementing a yet-to-be finalized EU divorce agreement to criminal sentencing and the environment.
My government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October.
Draft of policies outlined included plans for an EU withdrawal agreement bill to enshrine in British law a deal that Johnson is still racing to agree with Brussels before the scheduled end-of-the-month departure date. The Conservative leader has repeatedly said Brexit must happen this month, more than 3 years after Britons voted narrowly in a 2016 referendum to leave the bloc after nearly 5 decades of membership. But if he fails to get the deal by an EU summit on Thursday and Friday, he risks having to ask Brussels to delay under a law intended to prevent a potentially damaging no-deal exit.
Police arrested Extinction Rebellion activists after trying to disperse them by deploying water cannon in Brussels near the Royal Palace. An investigation will seek to determine whether police used excessive force against protesters taking part in an Extinction Rebellion protest in downtown Brussels at the weekend, which saw over 400 people arrested. The Brussels XCL's police zone launched an investigation after images surfaced of the officer tear-gassing a demonstrator who was already on the ground during the environmental group's protest on Saturday. Brussels Alderman Benoit Hellings took to Facebook to denounce the incident. He said that officers' violent acts raise serious questions, which he would raise the issue with Brussels Mayor Philippe Clos. At least 400 demonstrators occupied the palace or the Place Royal Square as part of the Royal Rebellion, a staged act of protest to call an urgent environmental action in the face of what the group deem a looming climate breakdown. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Kulina MTRs.
Digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Hong Kong's tourism industry is battling with a huge drop in visitor numbers as a result of months of violent protests, with arrivals down 40% according to the city's tourism board. Safety fears are the top reasons holidaymakers are delaying or canceling their trips, followed by concerns about travel disruption, industry experts have said. Mainland China, the financial hub's main tourism market, has seen the largest fall in numbers, followed by the short haul and long haul markets.
It is very, very difficult time for the tourism industry, with visitors' arrival having dropped at about 40% in August, and we're expecting similar numbers in September. With such a dramatic drop, it's definitely a very difficult time for not only the tourism industry, but also for the retail, the hotels, and pretty much I would say the entire Hong Kong is currently going through a very, very difficult time.
So everything is peaceful, and even better, there is less people. So we feel so far so good, and we don't know yet. But I think my wife still does not think it's good to go out too late at night. I think it would take some risk to come to Hong Kong because there is still uncertainties, unknowns, and we're still day 2 here. So we still have 2 more days to stay, and we don't know yet how things will pan out for the rest of our stay here.
But tourists who do press on with a visit to the city are reporting cheap flights, knocked down hotel rates, and short queues at attractions. Some hotels and restaurants have been forced to ask staff to take unpaid leave, with many now facing the threat of closure, Mr. Wu added. With no sign of the protests abating, the industry fears the downturn will continue into the new year.
With the decline in business, I know that a lot of travel agents have no choice but to implement a no-pay leave for their staff. Hotels are asking people to, first of all, clear their holidays, and then after that, if the business does not improve, then I'm sure some of them might have to implement a no-pay leave strategy as well, which will hurt the economy a lot because we employ a lot of people because it's a service industry, right? So with I believe 200,000 people directly or indirectly related to tourism, and I can just tell you that a lot of people are struggling day by day.
Pretty normal actually. Yes, it's the only thing is not a lot of tourists, so short lines. The streets a little bit empty, but life goes on. I was surprised at the hotel prices. So that was good. It was quite a positive, and the flights too.
The Hong Kong Tourism Board said total visitor arrivals in August were down 39% to 3.6 million people, made up of a 21% drop in the long-haul marts, a 32% fall in the short-haul market, and a 42% decline in arrivals from mainland China. With data still being collected, similar numbers were expected in September and are predicted for October. A study by travel analytics firms Forward Keys found the number of mainland Chinese visitors arriving by air fell 53% between July and September, with bookings between October and December down around 58% compared to the same period last year.
In a related news, from luxury Singapore apartments to Malaysian seafront condos, Hong Kong investors are shifting cash into Southeast Asian property. Increasingly violent protests as well as the China-US trade war are demoralizing the investors. Millions have taken to the streets during 4 months of pro-democracy demonstrations in the southern Chinese city, hammering tourism while also forcing businesses to lay off staff. And the property sector is feeling the pain. Property stocks in one of the world's most expensive housing markets have plummeted since June. Developers are being forced to offer discounts on new projects and cutting office rents.
I think the recent protest has so-called triggered up intense interest in Singapore and what is Singapore insofar as the Hong Kong segment of buyers or potential buyers goes. But when it comes to putting pen to paper, this is the mainland Chinese. A lot of them are based in Hong Kong, and they are the ones who are buying the super luxury end of the market. Mainland buyers, we find that we consider them uber high net worth, and they seldom take out mortgages. That means they are not so concerned about job security. All they want is capital preservation and they don't mind paying the 20% ADSD. So this protest actually stirred up, subgroups within Hong Kong itself. You have the high net worth Chinese nationals doing business there. They are transferring businesses here or transferring the wealth here. Then we have Westerners based in Hong Kong also wanting to come to Singapore to transfer their business over.
Hong Kong's property market is one of least affordable in the world, with sky-high prices fueled in part by wealthy mainlanders snapping up investments in a city which has failed for years to build enough flats to meet demand. But now mainland Chinese, who traditionally viewed property in Hong Kong as safe investment, are opting for rival financial hub Singapore as a result of the protests and the US-China trade war, according to observers.
Singapore eased monetary policy for the first time in more than 3 years on Monday as the US-China trade war bites, while the export-reliant economy narrowly avoided recession in the third quarter. The financial hub central bank joins others around the world from Europe to the US in loosening policy as fears mount of a global economic slowdown. The city-state has traditionally been the first among Asia's export-driven economies to be affected during a downturn, making it a closely watched barometer of demand for goods and services for the rest of the region. And it has been hard hit in recent months, with growth rates and exports plummeting as the US-China tensions upend the global trading system. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, or MAS, said it will reduce slightly the slope of the band at which its currency is allowed to move, effectively allowing for a weaker dollar as had been expected. Instead of using interest rates, Singapore manages monetary policy by letting the local dollar rise or fall against a currency basket of its main trading partners. In the last 6 months, the drag on GDP growth exerted by the manufacturing sector has intensified, reflecting the ongoing downturn in the global electronic cycle, as well as the pullback in investment spending, caused in part by the uncertainty in US-China relations, MAS said. Preliminary GDP data released at the same time showed Singapore's economy narrowly avoided tipping into a technical recession, defined as 2 consecutive quarters of contraction.
More than 3,600 members of the United Auto Workers went on strike Sunday against Mack Truck, a subsidiary of AB Volvo, as the union strike against General Motors Company continued. A new walkout hit Mack Truck plants in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Florida. The union said it was standing up for fair pay, benefits, and job protections for union members. UAW members get up every day and put in long, hard hours of work, from designing to building Mack trucks, said Ray Curry, Secretary-Treasurer of the UAW and Director of the Heavy Truck Department. UAW members carry on their shoulders the profits of Mack, and they are simply asking for dignity, fair pay, and job protections. Mack Truck executives said they were disappointed by the union's decision to stage a walkout. The UAW began a strike against General Motors on September 16, idling 48,000 union members. The strike continues as the two sides exchange contract proposals aimed at settling the dispute.
In other news, the EU's top trade official on Monday said Europe would fight until the very last moment to dissuade the United States from imposing tariffs in retaliation for illegal EU subsidies to Airbus. The European nations are scrambling to prepare a response to U.S. tariffs on billions of dollars worth of EU goods, including cheese and wine that the World Trade Organization formally approved on Monday. Set to enter into force on Friday, the European Union hopes to find common ground before then to avoid escalating trade tensions that risk further battering economies across the globe.
Will until the very last keep on pushing the Americans to try to see if we can find a settlement, or at least sit down and talk, and to freeze for the moment the tariffs.
Earlier this month, a WTO arbitrator gave Washington the green light to slap tariffs on $7.5 billion worth of EU imports, a landmark moment in the 15-year legal battle between Airbus and the U.S. plane maker Boeing. In the immediate line of fire are civilian aircraft from Britain, France, Germany, and Spain, the countries which formed Airbus, which will cost 10% more when imported to the U.S. from October 18. But the tariffs also target consumer products such as French wine, which President Trump had vowed to take aim at in recent months. Wine from France, Spain, and Germany will now face 25% tariffs. Cheeses from across Europe will also cost 25% more for American consumers, as will Made in England suits, cashmere, sweaters, and pajamas. Instead of tariffs, EU officials are trying to reach a negotiated settlement with the U.S. to avoid escalating trade tensions that risk battering economies across the globe. Now, if those negotiations fail to produce a deal, Brussels will get the chance to impose its own WTO-approved tariffs on U.S. products, after convincing WTO judges that Boeing had also benefited from illegal U.S. government subsidies. An arbitrator's award in that case is due in 2020.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Soccer, the world's favorite sport. And it's no wonder. Spectacular goals. And plenty of emotion. The best of game day. Kickoff.
ASEAN in Focus. Monday to Friday, 2 to 2:30 p.m.
A new report from the World Health Organization said that at least 2.2 billion people have vision impairment or blindness, of which over 1 billion cases could have been prevented or have yet to be addressed. More than 1 billion people worldwide are living with vision impairment because they do not get the care they need for conditions like short and far-sightedness, glaucoma, and cataract, according to the First World Report on Vision issued by the World Health Organization.
Today we can say is that there is at least, and I want to put the accent in at least, 2 billion people around the world with vision impairment. From these 2.2 billion people, at least 1 billion is living with a vision impairment that could have been prevented or is still to be addressed. Something needs to be done.
But the report launched ahead of World Sight Day last October 10 found that aging populations, changing lifestyles, and limited access to eye care, particularly in low and middle income countries, are among the main drivers of the rising numbers of people living with vision impairment.
Okay, looking at the lot.
To address the need for these 1 billion people that today do not have access to simple glasses, or they do not have access to cataract operation, then the cost for that, to address that, would be $14 billion.
Word on the Street, a free public festival celebrating reading and literacy in Toronto, is celebrating its 30th anniversary with its biggest features to date. Riza Mangilit reports from the scene.
Best-selling author Neil Gaiman once said, "A book is a dream you hold in your hands." If that's the case, then this weekend Toronto is filling up with hundreds of dreams, as today the city holds the Word on the Street Festival, an annual and national celebration of books and magazines, of writing and reading.
The Word on the Street Festival is an annual outdoor festival that hosts Canadian authors and writers and a marketplace that features books and magazines published here in Canada. This year, the festival is held here at the beautiful Harbourfront Centre, closing off the summer season with best offerings of the Canadian publishing industry. The WOTS Festival celebrates its 30th anniversary with its biggest features to date: 200 Canadian authors, 120 events, 16 stages, and 265 exhibitors. The festival program includes children's literature and activity tents, Indigenous author readings, writing workshops, panel talks, and Canada's largest marketplace of books and magazines.
We've actually been attending Word on the Street for many years. I think I want to say close to a decade, probably, that we've been coming. It's a great way, as an independent publishing house especially, to be able to put ourselves in front of the readers and introduce our books to them. So my husband actually founded the press, and he is a poet, and he realized when he looked out into the Canadian publishing landscape that there wasn't a lot of presses that were publishing poetry or work that was of a more experimental nature, and so that's why he was prompted to start the press. And this year we're actually celebrating our 15th anniversary. Oh, well, it's great. I mean, it's definitely an industry that has many challenges, as do many industries, I realize, but it's a very exciting time as well, though, in Canadian literature, I think, especially as there's been a lot of movement in the last few years to publish more broadly, publish voices that have been historically underrepresented in our publishing landscape, and our press is really committed to that. And so I've been very excited to see the growth of that across the industry, and I'm really happy to be able to contribute to that as well. I think one of the biggest challenges as an independent publisher we face is discoverability. I mean, there is just a lot out there, and how do you bring dialogue, discussion, or attention to your books? So that discoverability factor is an ongoing challenge, but one that we certainly try to rise to. Yeah, and I think that that's probably something that most independent presses would agree with.
According to the WOTS, their mission is simple: to create a free public festival celebrating reading and literacy in Toronto. For 30 years, this is what the festival has exactly done and continues to do. This year, the WOTS Festival features celebrated Canadian authors such as M.G. Basanji, Maureen Jennings, and Cory Doctorow, and upcoming authors like Casey Plett, Alicia Elliott, and Sherry Demeline.
Storytelling is universal, which makes reading and writing vital in human lives. In Toronto, Raza Mangilit, Eagle News. I'm one with 25.
Thank you, Raisa.
Thank you, Raisa. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.